The Bible is more than a single book. It's a collection of 66 books of history, stories, letters, and poetry written by dozens of different authors over thousands of years that all come together to tell one big story. It's a bigger story than you can even imagine. It's a big story about a really big God and what he did to rescue us. It shows us who we are and what we were created to do. Discover the story that shows you the character of God.
All right. Well, Studio 45, I'm really excited to be in here. If I haven't had the privilege of meeting you in person, playing you in Foursquare, doing whatever, my name is Jesse. I get to be a pastor here at New Spring Church. We're going to have a great time today talking about our new, for the month, big... That's right. And here's the thing. To kick things off, I thought it would be fun to play a game with this. So I need everybody up to their feet. This is a game. You're competing on your own. It's also going to be the fastest game we've ever played because the point of this game is you have to move quickly and you have to decide quickly. Now, with that being said, when you have to move quickly, don't run. Please don't like headbutt another person as you're running. Okay, pay attention. This room, we're going to divide in half right here. So this is the halfway mark. What we're going to do is I'm going to put two images up on our screen. Our story today is all about comparing two things, okay? So we're going to compare two things as they have to do with the big idea of forgiveness. Everybody say forgiveness. Everybody say deciding that someone who has wronged you doesn't have to pay. Okay, so we're gonna talk about forgiveness in regards to how do we compare two images. So I'm gonna put up an image. There's gonna be more things on one side of the screen than the other. So for instance, like one might be a basketball. There's gonna be several basketballs on one side. There'll be less on the other side. But here's the thing: when I put this up, I'm gonna count to 3 because you gotta make a quick judgment very quickly. This one's been up longer, so obviously you can kind of tell. But does that make sense? So I'm gonna put it up. I'm gonna count to 3. Within that time frame, you have to decide by going to that side of the room which side you think has more. Does that make sense? See, some of you are counting right now. That makes so much sense. So if we're going to count this as a practice, nobody move for this one, but it would be put up. I would say 1, 2, 3, and this side would have won. Does that make sense? Everybody understand how to play? All you're doing is comparing two things. Here we go. We're going to put something up. Christian, get ready. Put it up. 3, 2. Decide now. Go. 3, 2, 1. That's it. All right, we're saying this side by 3. Amazing. All right, here we go. Again, don't run anybody over. Don't run anybody over. Here we go. Here's the next one. 3, 2, 1, go. This side by 4. Amazing. Wow. All right, here we go. As soon as it goes up, decide. 3, 2, 1, go. Don't run anybody over. By 5. Way to go. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. You got to decide. Pick one. By 1, it was that side. How do you even do that? That's amazing. Okay, the last one I think is really easy. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, okay, that one was really easy. Good job. This side by left. All right, that was the world's fastest game. Give yourselves a round of applause. You all won. Pretty much all of those. You can grab a seat. If you're like, Jesse, why are we doing this? Here's the thing. In our story, we're going to compare two things. And there's just something about people. Listen to this, boys. Listen to this, girls. This is true. There's something about people we love to compare. We love to compare things. I mean, even down when one side had 20, one side had 19, you still, you're pretty quick at comparing, saying, I think this side has more. That's amazing to me. But here's the thing. How heavy one side was does matter. Like, for instance, let's pretend, for that money one, instead of 50 and 100, let's pretend that let's say you lost 100 pennies. Would you be upset about that? It's $1. I mean, maybe it's kind of upsetting, but it's $1. What if you lost 10,000 pennies, okay? $100. Would you be upset? Yeah. Both of them are money. Why does it matter? Because 100 is more. Yes, we get this. We understand this totally, completely. You guys totally get it. But in our story today, we're going to look at one of the smartest guys alive at his time who was comparing two things, and in the middle of the comparison, he missed the biggest thing that was right in front of him. Our story today comes out of the book of Luke. Everybody say Luke. Chapter 7. Now, that sounds familiar. It's because we were actually just in this chapter last week. Kaylee was here. She told the story about a Roman centurion who came to Jesus, right? If you've been here this year, you know we've been telling God's big story, how the Bible's not one book, it's 66 books. And we've been spending most of our time in the life of Jesus as we get ready for Easter, talking about his teachings, talking about his miracles. And today, we're actually talking about his dinner. Might surprise you, but there's really something pretty amazing that he shares at dinner in the book of Luke chapter 7. Now, I said this last time I was in here speaking, but I'll say it again. What's really cool about God's big story is right over here, this part. Because even though we read these amazing true stories, this is history. It really happened. The story that we're going to read today actually took place thousands of years ago. You and I today in 2023 are invited into God's big story. And that is amazing. And one of the ways we can live out God's big story is by understanding and comprehending what the big idea of forgiveness is. In fact, I would argue the central way we are a part of God's big story is by understanding that. So, in our story today, it starts off with a Pharisee. One of the Pharisees at the time had invited Jesus to have dinner with him. So he went to the Pharisee's house and he took his place at the table. Now, you've probably heard the term Pharisee before if you've been in church. Maybe you haven't. The Pharisees were sort of the elite of the day, okay? And the thing was, the Pharisees really cared about image. So about this box of props, just to help you kind of remember the people in our story. The first character, the first image that we're going to kind of compare is this Pharisee. You know, he would have had the prayer shawl on. He would have had the fancy robes. He would have walked around. A lot of times back then, they would have prayed out in the street so everybody could see how holy they were. They were really, really, really smart. A lot of people looked up to them, and they were leaders in a lot of ways. But Jesus butted heads with them a lot, not because anything on Jesus' side, but because the Pharisees sort of had this idea that, you know, if they just could look the part, it would be good. In fact, one point, Jesus said, hey, you're really worried about what's on the outside, and I'm more concerned about what's on the inside. And so this Pharisee sees Jesus. Again, we said this last week, but Jesus was well known by this point. And he kind of, hey, I'll invite Jesus over for dinner. And it'll kind of be like, oh, look, the Pharisee even had Jesus at his dinner. And so Jesus goes and he takes his place at this table. So if you can picture on one side the Pharisee, and on the other side, there's someone else that comes to this dinner who wasn't actually invited. Book of Luke chapter 7 tells us that there was a woman in that town who had lived a sinful life. And she learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with a special jar of perfume. Now you might hear this, you might think, Jesse, what are you talking about? Like, why was she carrying perfume? I'll get to that in a second. But what I want you to picture is the difference, okay? Boys, don't miss this, because you can miss it just like Simon, our Pharisee. He missed it. On one side, you have the Pharisee, who everybody in the town probably would have looked up to. And on the other side, you have the woman who had lived a sinful life, who everybody in the town probably would have looked down on. And she comes to dinner at the Pharisee's house. She wasn't invited, but she brings this jar of perfume. And let me just read these verses to you, because if you read them and you don't understand what's going on, you might miss it, just like Simon. Simon is the name of the Pharisee, just like he missed it. It continues in verse 38. It says that she stood behind Jesus and she cried at his feet, and she began to wet his feet with her tears, and then she wiped them, his feet. Ladies, imagine this. She wiped them with her hair. She kissed them, his feet, and poured perfume on them. You're thinking, Jesse, what is going on? Back in those days, they did not have cars like you and I do today. They didn't even have bikes like maybe you have at home. They had sandals, and they had dirt roads. And maybe some of them probably wouldn't even have sandals. Some of them probably just walked around barefoot. And if you walk around all day barefoot on dirt roads, your feet get what? Dirty, stinky, and gross. Now add to that, if you go walking on a dirt road, most likely there haven't been goats and donkeys and, horses walking on those same dirt roads. Okay, I don't need it. You guys are 4th and 5th graders. You're smart. You would have understood there would have been more than dirt on these roads. You gotta catch my drift, okay? So these guys have been walking around, and back in those days, because of that, a lot of times if you went to someone's house for dinner, before you even sat down, especially if you were a guest of honor, they would have a servant come over and they would wash your feet as a sign of respect, to get you ready for dinner so your feet aren't stinking up the whole house. They would show that to you, and sometimes they'd even pour oil on your head. Again, that was another sign of respect. But when Jesus arrives, he sits down at the dinner table, and the woman comes in. She sees where Jesus is sitting. She sees his feet. I really believe, I'm not positive, don't quote me on this, because again, it's not in the Bible, it's just my opinion, okay? I really believe she probably just wanted to say, hey, I heard Jesus was here. I would like to offer him this gift. Back then, perfume was very hard to come by. It's not like today where you buy it at, I don't know, whatever, Menards has it. I feel like, okay, everybody has it. But back in those days, it was very valuable. She might have even gotten this as like a wedding gift. She brings this. I think maybe she wanted to just give it to Jesus and leave quietly. But when she walks into the dinner table, she sees his feet, and they're filthy. Nobody's washed them. So she walks up to Jesus. She kneels down at his chair, and she cries. I'm not going to cry on command for you. She wets his feet with her tears, and then she takes his perfume and pours it out for him on his feet, and she starts washing it. And again, the reason why I say I don't know that she planned all this is because it's sort of impromptu, and all of a sudden his feet are wet, and they're wet with her tears and wet with the perfume, and so she doesn't have a towel. She didn't come ready for this, so she takes her soft hair and she uses them to dry off his feet, which is gross. But can you really picture this woman at the feet of Jesus? Like so overwhelmed with the fact that nobody has greeted him like a guest of honor. And so, I mean, just imagine if you're sitting there at that dinner table. Some of you probably in the front row, can you smell this? Like it starts wafting through the room. Maybe somebody didn't even see her come in, but all of a sudden they smell the smell and they hear the weeping, and they look over, and this perfume being poured on Jesus' feet. And Simon is one of the ones that looks over. I imagine everybody at the dinner table was maybe a little uncomfortable. But Simon looks over, and he's probably the most uncomfortable, because this is what we're told he thought. This is amazing. The Pharisee who invited Jesus saw this, and he said to himself, if Jesus was really a prophet, he would know who's touching him, and he would know what kind of woman she is. She's a sinner. See, Simon, the Pharisee, is comparing two things, isn't he? He's comparing his prayer shawl, his great life, to this woman, and he's saying he wouldn't even allow her to touch his feet. And Simon didn't say anything. Simon just thought it. Jesus speaks up and he answers his thoughts. This is amazing. He says, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he says. I'm sure he thought, oh, I'll already know what he's going to say. And then Jesus says this: 2 people owed money to a certain leader, a certain lender, okay? One person owed, just like we saw earlier, 100. I have gold coins, but silver coins. It would have been a lot of money back in the day. They owe 500 silver coins. The other owes 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he let them go without paying. The lender did. Which of them loved him more? What do you think Simon said? 500. The one with 500. I suppose, he says, the one who owed more is how Simon answers this question. He says, yeah, well, I guess maybe the guy that had 500 forgiven. And then Jesus drops this bomb, because it's really not about coins. It's not about money. It's about something so much bigger. And Simon's so busy comparing that he's missing who's at his table. He says this. Jesus answers. He says, I tell you the truth. Listen to this in Luke chapter 7. Everybody say chapter 7. He turns toward the woman and he says, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water to wash my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears, and she wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss. Back in those days, you didn't do handshakes or fist bumps. Back in those days, they do a kiss on the cheek to greet someone. He says, you didn't greet me like I was an honored guest. She, however, cannot stop kissing my feet. That was not normal back then, okay? That was still weird back then. Even that was weird. So he tells her this. Watch this. He says, I tell you this. Her many sins have been forgiven. She has shown that she understands this by her great acts of love. But who has only been forgiven a little will love only a little. And he turns to her and he says, your sins are forgiven. See, Simon missed it. And boys and girls, if you guys have grown up in church, you might miss it too. But when it comes to the big idea of forgiveness, if we're going to put this big idea to work inside of us the rest of this month, we have to understand this. It's that no matter what, whether you're the Pharisee or the sinful woman in the story, everyone needs forgiveness. And here was the deal. Her understanding of just how much forgiveness she needed helped her to respond to God with the love that she should have. Guys, what's funny, I've been using this story this week. And so I poured out this perfume, and you know what I noticed? As I left the room, do you know what followed me? The smell of the perfume. It stayed on my hands. It's been on my hands all week. See, that's forgiveness. When you understand that Jesus Christ died for you, died for the lies that you've told. He died for the times you've disrespected your parents. He died for the times that you took that thing and nobody even knew that you took that thing. He died for the times you hit your brother because you were angry. When you understand he died so that he could forgive you, it changes everything. It changes everything. See, it stays with you just like this scent. You have it with you wherever you go. You're reminded that the God in heaven that made you and loves you has forgiven you. So you drop all the comparisons. The truth is, all of us have an unpayable debt. Even Simon, who is compared to the guy with 50, he had an unpayable debt to a perfect, holy God. And he missed it. The Son of God was in his living room at his dining room table, and he missed it because he was busy comparing. Boys and girls, if we want to understand the big idea of forgiveness, we'll understand how amazing it is that God in heaven has forgiven us. Would you guys stand up? I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray for us that we respond to this forgiveness in the way that the woman did. You know, that woman, when she came in, she wasn't worried about what other people thought of her. She didn't worry that Simon was going to interrupt things. She bowed at his feet and she poured out that perfume and she said, Jesus, I love you, I love you, I love you. Why? Because she had known what it meant to be forgiven. Ladies and gentlemen, when we stand up here and you guys are getting ready to worship, when you worship, are you worried about the people around you? You're worried about what they think of you? Are you worried if I raise my hands I might look silly? Because here's the thing. If you are, you're distracted on something that doesn't even matter. At the end of the day, worship is a response to God saying, Lord in heaven, thank you for forgiving me. Even though I was a sinner, Jesus died for me. See, that is the natural response. And guess what? It might make the person next to you uncomfortable. But when you understand the love of God has been poured out for you, you will pour out your life in response to him, and that will stay with you. The scent of forgiveness will follow you the rest of your week, the rest of your days. It'll follow you because God is so good. Let me pray for you. You guys bow your heads and close your eyes. Lord, I pray for every student in this room. I pray for every leader in this room that we would understand the depths of your love for us, that you have loved us while we were sinners, God. There was things in my life that I couldn't pay for. Lies, deceit, pride, anger. I've disrespected my parents, disrespected others. Help me to love others as you do, and help me to experience the forgiveness that you have given us through Jesus. And all God's children said,